I'm Cynthia Marks, and I head up the Holistic Psychoanalysis Foundation established by my late husband, Dr. Bernard Bale. Welcome to And Now Love. Today, we are diving into the transformative power of radical compassion. Joining me is a true luminary in the field of spiritual formation, Dr. Frank Rogers, Jr. Frank is a professor at Claremont School of Theology and the co-founder of the Center for Engaged Compassion. But more than his titles, Frank is someone who has walked the difficult path of turning profound personal trauma into a roadmap for healing others. His work beautifully echoes our exploration of how we can rewrite the unconscious imprints that hold us back. Thank you for being here to help us understand how we can move from a fragmented mosaic toward a life cradled in compassion. Welcome.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for such a generous introduction. Yeah.
We're happy to have you here, and you're so busy. We appreciate you taking out the time to come here and meet with us in Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
So your most recent book, yes, Cradled in Compassion.
Yeah, Cradled in the Arms of Compassion, right? Exactly.
And that's available wherever you buy your books.
Wherever you buy books, it is available. Yeah, it's a spiritual journey from trauma to recovery. So it's, my personal story.
Well, let's dive in. Tell us first, to you, what is compassion?
Well, compassion, most simply, it's being moved by another person's experience and feeling some warm regard for them that prompts us to want to ease their suffering a little bit or promote their flourishing. It's a spiritual energy. I mean, when people take the time to really pay attention and really notice somebody and be moved by their experience and feel something toward them that wants to respond in a way that's connective and restorative, it's a beautiful, beautiful moment. It's a spiritual moment.
And compassion then is different from empathy. I think we confuse the two.
I think we confuse the two a great deal. Yeah. Empathy, for me, empathy is really like a parallel emotional experience. So if I see somebody's pain, I wince, right? If I see somebody, elated, they scored a winning goal, I get elated too. Or it's like an emotional parallelism, which is great because it helps us like a tuning fork. I feel attuned. I feel like, okay, this person gets me, or we're on a similar wavelength. But that's different than compassion. If we see somebody's suffering and we wince, I mean, we get their pain enough that they feel like, okay, yeah, you get this. But if I stay there, that's going to actually create empathic distress for me, right? I'm going to wince. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's got to be awful. And it actually activates the pain response systems in our brain and releases cortisol and adrenaline and stress hormones. And so shifting from, oh my gosh, I get your pain to, and I recognize your humanity and I see who you are and I feel a warm, loving regard for you that makes me want to reach out in a way that's going to be restorative. That shifts it from that kind of pain response system to a connective system. It releases oxytocin in our bodies. It restores us, the love hormone, as opposed to depleting us. So empathy is very, very different. I mean, it's a precondition for compassion, but it's different. And if we only feel empathy, we're going to end up in distress. Yeah.
And so compassion is super important in keeping us truly connected to each other. I still feel like it's, probably for a lot of us, elusive. How do we know when we're feeling compassion, or how do we feel when someone's got compassion for our situation?
Yeah, my experience is we kind of have an inner barometer around this. I mean, we kind of know what it feels like when we experience compassion. We can sense when somebody is genuinely connected to me or interested in how I'm doing or what I'm thinking, as opposed to I'm on their to-do list or they're going through the motions. There is an inner barometer that kind of resonates like, oh my gosh. And my experience is when that happens, there's kind of a little relative, of time. Like things kind of stop for a moment. It's like, oh, wait a minute, let's pause here. Something really important is happening here. It expands our spiritual capacities, and so we kind of have that tuning fork when we experience it. And I think we all have that capacity to extend compassion to others as well when we are able to kind of settle into our deepest self, our best self, where our capacities and our spiritual abilities reside within us. So for me, it's about accessing that deeper place within us, and I'm taking the time to do that.
And is this something that you've known throughout your life? That compassion has this capability?
It's something that I observed and witnessed, absolutely. I mean, for me, if we got personal, for me, kind of the icon of compassion was my grandmother, Angelina Clementina Irina Cavalli Rogers. She was an immigrant
so
from Italy. Yeah, Italian was her first language, and just this beautiful, beautiful human being. And she was one of those. You go to her house, and she's in the kitchen. She's going to be cooking for you. And but what I remember is when I was in high school, we lived in San Francisco. There was a child of the deacon, a son of the deacon, was engaged to a prominent daughter in the church, and they were going to get married. But it turned out that this man came out as gay when he came down with GRID, back when gay-related immune deficiency, before they realized that it was not just gay men, and it was AIDS. And his church, they ostracized him. His family kicked him out. He moved into San Francisco and found into a shelter. And when my grandmother found out about that, she found out what shelter he was at, went over to the shelter and saw him. And he was emaciated. He was weeks away from passing, and she could just see, his deepest fear is he's going to die alone. And something in her said, not on my watch. And she brought him to her house, converted the guest room, her sewing room into a guest room, had a bed for him. And for the last 4 weeks of his life, she sat with him and fed him broth and put ointment on his lesions and sang him lullabies. And she was with him when he passed, literally singing lullabies from the old country. And for me, I remember that like it was yesterday, and it was such a powerful, powerful experience to see my grandmother tending to him, and it was like I knew something special was happening here. This is a restorative energy, a restorative presence that I want to be able to know more fully in my life. People who would extend that kind of care to me, but also I want to live a life like that. And she embodied compassion, and something when you see it, it's like, that's special. There's something there that is tender and special. That's what it means to be human.
Yeah,
that's what it means to be human, right there.
Beautiful. So she came packaged with that?
In some ways, but I think we all have the capacities for compassion. All of us, can kind of find a tenderness towards a pet, towards a loved one, towards a grandchild. We all have the capacity. We're wired for connection. We're wired for that kind of attachment.
Yes. But that was a big reach.
And that was a big reach. So this was somebody who also cultivated a life. She was a very spiritual person. She prayed every day. She was a lifelong Catholic. And so her own spiritual practice was one that was cultivating her own capacities for doing that and for wanting to be that kind of presence in the world. That was part of her mission. That was part of her life's vocation that gave her meaning. And it's also not just for the other person. It was restorative for her too. When we extend compassion to another, there's kind of what they call it, that helper's high. There's like a moment of connection that feels restorative and regenerative for us. We can feel that ourselves. There was a study of doctors who chronically say, I just don't have time to try to connect compassionately with my patients. I got so many things to do. And so they did a study, just practicing 30 seconds of compassionate connection with a patient when you walk in through the day. Just 30 seconds to pay attention to them, ask them how they are feeling, and emotionally connect, hear what they're feeling and be emotionally connected to that, and then extend that warm regard of your desire to be an agent of healing for them for 30 seconds. And what they discovered was in those 30 seconds, the doctors, first of all, remembered this is why they were doctors in the first place. They came back in touch with the compassion that brought them into their work. And they felt so restorative out of the connection that it was like time stopped for a few moments and their own spirits were replenished. And they feel like they had more time in the day by taking that extra 30 seconds to compassionately connect. So there is something restorative about it when we can cultivate that in our lives. 30 seconds in a day with a barista, you know?
Right. It's pretty fabulous. And I think it's truly something that you can practice. You know, if you say to yourself, well, I don't know how to make that connection. I mean, I say, how are you? And then I turn my head. Or what if you said, how are you? And the person responded, and then you asked another question, and they said something else, and you asked another question. I mean, then you start to really get into each other. Then that person also feels some amount of safety. I've been heard.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it can be cultivated like that. And part of it starts with, just paying attention to another person, taking the time to just notice the other person, because we so seldom do that, right? We're going through our day and, get the things that we got to get done, and, or through our own agenda or our own assumptions or our prejudices, don't have time, and just stop for that moment and notice the barista, just like, oh my gosh, this is a human being right there. And then you alluded to like curiosity. I'm just curious, how are they doing? Yeah. Just how is your day? And I genuinely would like to know. I genuinely would like to hear your answer. And when they offer an answer, we're moved by it. I'm having a great day. Oh, how cool. Wonderful. Or, you know what, it kind of sucks. And it's that empathic oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And let me just kind of access that warm, that grandmotherly care that my grandmother had. Or I mean, just like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're a human being, you're having a hard day. Let me just take a moment and appreciate what you just said. Appreciate your humanity and be here for another moment. Yeah, you want to say a little bit more about that, or whatever we might respond. But yeah,
it is quite something when you're working through your busy day and you're in line to get your coffee and you think, I just can't take the 15 seconds to. But once you start doing that 15 seconds is nothing but a jewel then.
Right.
It's and you're right. It is not that you've lost 15 seconds out of your day.
No, yeah. You walk away with a little more of a skip in your own step, right? I mean, there's something in your own spirit that got rekindled here. And yeah, it's a gift that we give to ourselves, exactly, as well. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of talk these days too about genuine connection versus the idea of connection, that there's a checklist. Well, these are the things I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to say something good to someone or help someone every day and check it off the list. And that's great because you're doing something good. But when you genuinely do it, when it comes from your place of love or from your heart, and you make that human connection, it's huge. And I think that is the human experience. We, in being human, we need to connect with each other. I know there are a lot of us who, are lonely, and it's a tragedy that so many people aren't connecting with each other. And we're doing things with technology that, are sort of sending us further in that direction of, a lot of alone time. But to have these conversations and to bring to the forefront how important our connections are, I think we just can't do this enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like attachment theorists have helped us realize that as much as our bodies need food and water to survive, our spirits need connection and attachment for our spirits to survive. If we don't have moments where we feel seen and heard, if a child goes through that, not feeling seen or heard or connected with, I mean, they're going to be depressed. I mean, they're going to decline. We need this. We're wired for this. And that's how... that's how we grow, and that's how we find resilience. And same thing as adults, right? I mean, if we don't take the time to genuinely connect, I mean, something in us starts to get depleted. It starts to wither inside. Yeah.
So in your book, is this sort of what was happening to you as a child, that you weren't able to find? Well, you had your grandmother, thank goodness. Mm-hmm. The places of compassion, places where you could be held, supported, made safe. Tell us how you what your journey was and how you, I don't want to say recovered, but how you, what would be a better word, how you came to understand the importance of that and to move on and do what you're doing now, which is so helpful to all of us.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yes. So, yeah, I didn't grow up with this at all. I'm a sexual abuse survivor, and so my childhood was extraordinarily chaotic and abusive and trauma filled, and so in trying to cope with that, I just had the rages within me and depressions and suicidal impulses. And part of it being a sexual abuse survivor is the shame. That nobody could know what had happened to us. And we just keep that buried up so severely, so that I was 30 years old and putting up this spit polished image of I'm a professor and a churchgoer and being the good family person and whatnot, but inside I just had these rages and this self-loathing and put myself to sleep with suicidal impulse, just how could I die tonight, or the depressions or these memories that would just haunt me, and I would just try to push them away, and which was absolutely it's like trying to push a buoy underwater. Or even worse, right? It's trying to take a volcano and put it underwater. It just would spit up in all different ways, to the point, where I did try to kill myself and ended up in an institution. And that for me was really kind of the turning point of my life. In the mental hospital, had the most profound spiritual experience, one of the most profound of my life, but also an invitation to have a completely different relationship with my own internal world. And it revolved around compassion, because what I was doing was I was judging all of these impulses. They were bad. They were not very spiritual. They made me dirty. If anybody saw them, they would be disgusted by me. There's something wrong with me for feeling all this stuff. And so I would either try to suppress all of that, or I would try to manhandle it, right? I'd try to, will it away with the spiritual practice. Okay, I'm just going to fast, to make that rage go away, or I'm going to try to meditate or whatnot. But again, it was like pushing a buoy underwater. It just made things worse and worse until it just exploded. And the absolute linchpin, the game changer for me, was when I came to realize that all of these interior movements, all of these impulses within us, they're there for a reason. They are there as some kind of a cry. They're rooted in suffering. They're rooted in pain. They're rooted in some deep need that is aching to be heard and aching to be met. So instead of judging and suppressing, I began to turn inward and start exploring that with compassion. Okay, this rage, where does it come from? What's underneath it? And the paradoxical thing was, as I began to extend exactly that kind of curiosity and openness, and let me really try to understand from that genuine place to myself, as opposed to like just to another person, those interior movements, those parts of us began to relax. That's what they ached to be heard. They ached to be met. And wherever the root was underneath that ached to be healed. And it was compassion towards myself then that began to bring about an interior restoration. Absolute game changer. I was never taught that in any psychological or spiritual tradition that I was deeply involved in.
And was there some person who was helping you with this?
Absolutely. I was in therapy and came across an amazing therapist who had these sensibilities. Therapy sessions were, Mark, what is wrong with me that I'm feeling all this? What an awful person I am. He said, no, your feelings are here for a reason. The body doesn't lie. There's something going on. Let's explore that with compassion. So absolutely having compassion-based therapeutic support was huge in the midst of that. I was also with a spiritual director that was very similar, who helped me just kind of access those spiritual resources that are just nothing but compassion. And so, I absolutely had people that were helping me along the way, as well as, kind of just daily. My meditation practice daily was, okay, let me take plunges to my inner world. And all right, I'm just insane with rage. Okay, let me just find a way to be able to catch my breath and not get caught up in the energy of it, but just say, okay, it's here for a reason. Can I just kind of be with it? And can I just be open? Okay, where are you coming from? What is going on? And accessing that capacity helped that be able to relax. And then what was the pain underneath that? And then, oh my gosh, yeah, it's like these young ones inside of me still living in the terror of that abuse. And what did they need from me?
Yeah.
They needed my compassion. They needed my compassion. You know, they're like still imprisoned in the camper shells or wherever they were. And like, okay, yeah, you need me to come and be with you with compassion. And that was the game changer.
I'm so glad that that happened for you.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be here. Absolutely.
When you were
wouldn't.
struggling with this, when you were full of rage, but yet you were still teaching and a person of theology, how did you manage those two different worlds? I guess not
very
well.
Right. Not very well. Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, it was just that's also, you know, the severity of the shame of at least of a sexual abuse survivor. I mean, the shame was so unlivable. I mean, if anybody had even an inkling of kind of the horrors that I had gone through or the cacophony inside of me, I was convinced I would be just, you know, they would be disgusted. And so the severity of that just ratcheted up that the tenacity with, I will not let anybody see this. And so would go to work or whatever. But when I got home, I mean, the lid comes off. I was uncorked, you know, through my sleep. I mean, through the marriage I had at the time. I mean, it was awful. I was a wreck. I was an absolute wreck, and it was not sustainable to the point where I could not keep the container down anymore, and it just erupted. And thank goodness it erupted in a way that, you know, I didn't actually drive off the cliff. I got to the help and ended up in hospital and began a, you know, decades-long journey of, okay, let's find a way of restoration. And it was absolutely a way of compassion.
I had a similar experience, and I think we have interesting humans, different ways of dealing with the trauma that we go through in our lives. And I convinced myself that what had happened to me, this sounds so weird, it's you know, it's still embarrassing for me to say it out loud, was really love. And I turned it into something in my head that it wasn't. I was so ashamed, and yet this was all in my head. I didn't share this with anyone, but yet it affected my relationships with friends and romantic relationships. I held this thing as love. It was a fantasy, and all my real life relationships could never match up to that thing that wasn't a reality. I remember listening to the radio one day, and there was a report on sexual abuse of teenage girls, and I was so moved by that, and I thought, how can this happen to these young women? I felt such empathy, compassion, and removed.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness that never happened to me. I mean, I made up a whole story, and it wasn't until maybe 15 years ago that I began to really look at that honestly, and that was not on my own. That was in my case with the love and support of my husband. And it was really the first time in my entire life where I had a space where I felt like I was loved, and that there was compassion, and that I could share, and this person was not going to be disgusted by me. And it took me a long time to really believe that that was true. And I tried a little bit at a time. And one day I said, how could I have thought that was love? How am I, not a bad person for having shared that? I mean, there's so much, and my gosh, we are so not alone. We're so not alone in having these experiences and all the unique ways we try to, handle the trauma or squash it down or turn it into something it isn't. I mean, I don't know about you, but I even had the experience of, if I let go of this thing that I've told myself is the truth, what fills that space?
Mm-hmm.
What do I do with this new open territory?
Threatening. It's uncharted. It's
Yeah.
absolutely.
Did you feel some of that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. And thank you for sharing such your tender story, because it is so common, and that's one of the things that I think is so important, is that we do share these stories so that people recognize themselves in that. And
I think so. Well, you wrote an entire book and put it all on paper, so thank you.
Yeah. A lot out of that impulse for sure. Yeah. Yeah, but also, I mean, the kind of the self-compassion that I experience for myself, it is radical in that it offers compassion to every interior movement or every impulse within us. So even that part of us that says, I'm going to turn this into love, or the part of me that is just going to kind of suppress this because it is so shameful, well, that means well too, right? I mean, it's a part
Yes,
of
I
us that is trying to
understand.
help us survive and trying to make sense out of this. And we if we do violence to that part of us, it's only going to escalate the inner chaos as well. So it's like, can we have compassion even for that part of me that's trying to make sense out of this in this weird way, or the part of me that look for relief in suicidality. I mean, as destructive as that is, can I have some compassion? Like, okay, I see where you were I see where that came from, and how you were trying to at least find me some peace in the midst of this. We don't need to do it that way anymore. I mean, and that's the paradoxical thing, is as we extend compassion even to these kind of destructive impulses within us, they begin to relax within us, and so that's a way of healing. It's like, okay, I don't have to be gripped by suicidality or gripped by this illusion of making meaning. That can dissipate, and because I have those deeper capacities within us. I mean, so compassion for me really is a restorative interior balm for all of the stuff that we are trying to make sense of in our experience.
Yes, and I mean, it is part and parcel to what we talk about here, really, in that we are, wanting to help individuals to get back to who they truly are, to understand their authenticity, to not sort of be, burdened by the trauma that we carry, unconsciously, consciously supporting all this stuff that we've been given through the course of life, or even in utero, or past generations, because that's not who we are. Yeah. That's our circumstances. That's trauma. But who we are is this beautiful thing. And, it gives us a new way to look at our comrades in the world. It helps us see the love and humanity in each of us. But we can't really get there fully until we have some self-compassion. Mm-hmm. So are there different types of compassion? A spiritual connection with spirit compassion, a self-compassion, a compassion for other humans? Are those the same thing, or is one required for the others?
Yeah, I mean, I see them as interconnected. I mean, and my work, it kind of talks about a threefold rhythm of compassion, so that compassion, our capacities for compassion are deepened when we are able to connect with some kind of a sacred source of compassion, whatever that might be. But in all spiritual traditions, whatever is considered ultimate, it's compassionate. I mean, that is at its core, and whether we anthropomorphize that and call it God, or whether that's just the energy that sustains this universe. When we are connected to that, in various moments, we feel ourselves held in some transcendent presence of compassion, some energy that is sustaining and restorative. And so the more we can kind of deepen our own rootedness in that, or kind of come back home to that, the more we are able to relax into and become our best selves. So that is one dimension of cultivating compassion. And then self-compassion would be a second piece, is then, okay, my experience is exactly like yours. We have this spiritual essence within us. It's beautiful. It's a spark of the divine, and it's in every single human being. And the amazing thing is, no matter how traumatized we are, it doesn't damage that spark. that spiritual essence within us still beats. It might be deeply, deeply buried, but it's within us. And if we can tend to all of the cacophonies and the emotions and the impulses that dislodge us from that, tend to those with compassion, we can settle back into who we really are in our truest humanity. And then thirdly, as we are able to do that more, it opens our capacities to be able to recognize that every human being, on the one hand, has a spark of the divine within them, or has a spiritual essence of beauty and humanity. Every single human being, no matter who. And when we are dislodged from that and people embody things that are difficult, it's because of pain. It's because of suffering. It's because of trauma. They weren't born that way. They have an essence in them. Something traumatized them out of that. And so we can have compassion for that as well. And out of compassionate action, maybe create spaces where people can find their own inner center again as well. So I kind of see the threefold dimensions of compassion.
Yeah, and you said it so well. It seems like an easy thing for an individual to approach. You just start investigating with some curiosity those three components of compassion. I so agree with you in that there is something whole and beautiful in each of us. And a lot of us, I think, don't have an opportunity in life to really give it a lot of consideration. We just want to make sure there's food on the table for our children, and we want to make sure there's enough money so we can keep a roof over our heads. And I feel like our world now is faced with so many individuals who have to attend to the nature of the world right now, that we can't take the time or feel the preciousness of taking that time to investigate what that means. And I don't know how we get there, except for having conversations, sort of like this. You're doing it on a large scale through the work you do as a professor and your books. And how do we make this more widespread? I mean, we keep saying if we can affect one individual who then affects another individual and another, well, that's something. Is that what we do?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like discerning what is mine to do, right? So we all are going to have different invitations in how we can cultivate a more compassionate world. And so what is mine to do? And some of these things are so big, we can't transform the social structures, but we can be involved in advocacy work or, justice work that is helping create conditions so people aren't so mired in the things that dislodge them from those centers. But also, talking with one person, speaking to the heart of one person and cultivating that compassionate connection, that's beautiful. I mean, that's gorgeous in and of itself. And so I want to kind of be careful that we don't just sort of glorify the maximum, right? I mean, just let's celebrate the little moments, the little connections, because those are restorative and those add up. It's like the little snowflakes that continue to fall. And if we continue to cultivate those, something big's going to happen. The avalanche will move us in a different direction over time. So.
Well, and in fact, as you say that, I remember Bernard, my husband, saying to me when he said, when I pass away, if there's anything you can do to move my work forward. And I'm like, I don't know what that was. I said, how could I even begin? I'm you're this fabulous doctor and you've been doing this for decades. And I just happen to love you to pieces. And we've had this amazing relationship where we just talk for 24 hours a day, whatever it might be. And he said, just one individual at a time, one person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, I think, really. But I think too that the only way we're going to stop the wars, heal the world, is to really come to each other with love. And we always talk about what sort of a bad rap love gets in terms of being a word that encompasses a lot of things, but it is not corny. It's our ultimate tool for saving ourselves.
I genuinely, believe that compassionate love is the healing elixir, personally in our souls, but also socially in our world and in relationships and all of it. It is that healing restorative agent, that philosopher's stone. And you experienced that too. I mean, just how tender with your husband and how, there was compassion there that created a space where what remnants that still needed healing within you were able to be tended and nurtured. And out of that, not just one individual, now you're doing, these podcasts and these conversations and, what is yours to do? Just kind of nudging along one piece at a time, cultivating compassion and love in the world. Yeah.
Look at how this turned around to you telling me I'm doing good work.
But you are. I mean, that's just genuine.
We're here because you're so good at what you're doing and bringing things to light that we wouldn't otherwise know. So is this something that you're teaching at Claremont? Is compassion? Is there a course?
That actually is, right, exactly. So we teach at Claremont courses on how compassion can be a personally restorative spiritual practice or invitation. How do you tend to our inner worlds, and how do we access that self within us that has compassion and find healing from whatever our journey has been. And we also teach courses in what does it mean to embody compassion in relationships. We work a lot with activists as well. What is compassionate social engagement? So we teach courses in how to actually cultivate this way of being and the practices that sustain that. And at the Center for Engaged Compassion, we also teach workshops and courses, and we have a training program just for regular folks who don't want to go get an academic degree, but want to be able to, how do we access those springs of compassion within us and have retreats and workshops that deepen that and how we can embody that more fully in our lives, wherever we are living, in our relationships, and discern what is ours to do in embodying compassion in the world. So we do workshops, teaching in both contexts.
So your courses at Claremont are under the umbrella of theology?
Yeah, or spiritual formation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an interfaith school of theology. Yeah, so a lot of folks are training to become spiritual caregivers of one form or another, or pastors or rabbis or imams.
And then in your center, as you say, that's open to anyone.
Everyone, right.
And how does one find out about what you're up to there?
Yeah, at centerforengagedcompassion.com. I mean, we have a web page where our programs are advertised. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Yeah.
And if one were to take part, is there an ultimate goal, or is that also is that a unique situation that everyone would come into that program with a different desire and then an ultimate end product?
Yeah. There'd be some different desires. Our bread and butter, though, is kind of what we call the compassion practice. And so most people come in, and it is a compassionate process by which we tend, on an everyday level, just tend to what's going on in our own lives, in all of the impulses and emotions and self-talk that harasses us, that kind of dislodges us from our deepest core. How do we tend to all that? I mean, what do we do with all of that? And so we develop these compassion-based processes of, instead of suppressing it and judging it or trying to will it away by spiritual intention or whatnot, let's turn to all of that with compassion. So we walk people through how to tend to our own interior lives with this compassion-based approach that not only kind of stills the cacophonies, but helps us access our own deepest self-essence, that spiritual core within us. And so it's a fairly straightforward process to describe, but to do it takes a lot of practice and a lot of support. And so we have groups and we have facilitators and trained companions to kind of facilitate that process, but helping persons learn this very powerfully restorative way of tending to our own interior lives. And then we have workshops that, okay, and then what about my relationships? So how do I be my most compassionate self in the relationships at my home or at my workplace? And what are the practices by which we do that? So we train for those. And then we have also workshops and courses on, I want to be an agent of compassion in this very polarized world. So how might we do that as well? And we host conversations across difference, for example, and how to have compassionate dialogue with people who are different from us, and how do we discern, what we might do that nurtures a little bit more of a society of equity and dignity and compassion in the midst of that. So there's different entree points, but it's the same sensibilities we're cultivating in all of those.
We could all use a dose of being compassionate amongst ourselves now with all of our differences and our polarization.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's been at the heart of our work, these last few years, especially.
I can imagine.
It's such and not just nationally. I mean, there are faith communities that are deeply polarized and splitting, and families and communities, and just people so entrenched in polarized ideologies. And again, it's this compassion-based approach, So people fight for something fiercely because something's at stake for them. So it comes from someplace, that ideology or that behavior. There's some deep pain underneath there that's being protected, or some deep need, or some value that feels sacred and being threatened. Something is going on. And so if we just shame each other or try to silence each other or just debate each other, that's only going to entrench us all the more in whatever we are mired in.
I think so.
How do we do something different?
Like those internal feelings that you were having would only be heightened.
Exactly. It only escalates if it's trying to be talked out of, or trying to be suppressed, or trying to be fixed or changed or managed. It only intensifies it. And people are the same way. We just approach people and trying to change them or fix them, or they're just going to get more deeply rooted. And, so what if we can cultivate a posture of, okay, I know I just really don't understand, but I would like to. I would really like to understand what's so important for you. What's at stake for you in this? Help me understand. And there are conversations that could be had where people can genuinely appreciate, okay, I get that. I still disagree, but I have understanding now. And we have some common humanity in the midst of this as well. We have some appreciation for each other, but also recognizing that this person is more than just that ideology too. And kind of their life that was underneath that becomes clear for us. And we connect around that too. And a different type of relationship is possible, which is what a democracy is, right? It's not that we all agree.
Right.
It's that we live civilly and with dignity and humanity, treating each other with kindness and curiosity, even in the midst of our differences.
Yes, which I'm very proud of America in terms of that having been how we started. Yeah. And just to get back to that would be a treasure.
That would be a treasure. We've gotten so far from those moorings, right? But that was a beautiful vision. Absolutely, still is a beautiful vision.
It is. And if we can just keep that in mind, across so many platforms in life.
Yeah.
Something like happened with recently with the Methodist Church, where they split because of beliefs about the gay community and not the gay community. That's what's hard for me to sort of wrap my head around, because we call upon these agencies to sort of represent love and compassion. And can you help me settle with that?
Well, I would say a couple of things. I mean, first of all, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you completely. Our faith communities, we hope, are spaces that are tapped into this spiritual energy that is able to hold polarities together and treat people with kindness and dignity, even in the midst of our different. We hope for this or in the midst of conflict and difference, that we can still have treat each other with humanity in the midst of that. And so that our faith communities do split in rancorous ways is deeply tragic, and it pinches my soul too, because it's like something is wrong. That's not the spiritual essence of compassion that I know is so restorative for our world. That's not that. We've gotten dislodged from that. I would also say that it's possible to have disagreement, and it's even possible to maybe to have to split communities.
Yes.
That we really do see things very, very differently, and our own commitments into who we are going to be tending and are really going to be a stretch. It might be better off for us to have just separate communities and do that. But we can do even that with compassion and with care, right? I mean, it's like, conscious uncoupling, right? There may be relationships that do need to be severed, but we can do that in ways that are still maintaining the humanity of the other, is not being dismissive and self-righteous or, cantankerous. So I would like to see that kind of win the day.
Yes. And in that particular instance, is that what you think is happening, that the two factions sort of backed away saying, we it's okay to not get along and we need to support what we're doing and we still love you guys over there?
So this is a huge issue across the Methodist denomination, and so it's all
sorry.
over the map. No, that's okay. But I mean, the answer is there are places where that split happened in just horrifically cantankerous ways. I mean, we're just awful. I mean, and lawsuits and just really, really challenging and behavior on both sides being done towards the others. And there are places where that split has happened in precisely this way, where there has been some amicable, recognition of the differences, and we're going to still treat you with humanity and celebrate you go your way, and we're going to go our way, wish you nothing but the best. So it's diverse. I mean, it happens both ways.
Yeah, like the world, I suppose.
Like the world, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and I suppose, though, in the world of theology, we have all of these, different modes of operation, different bits of organized religions, that continue to morph and become something different. And this group separates from that group. And, hopefully we do that well and in loving ways.
Yeah, we hope, and it doesn't happen a lot. I mean, often those splits are really really painful. Religious institutionalization itself can be really painful too, where the institution becomes very dislodged from the spiritual currents that gave rise to it. I mean, I am Catholic, and the Catholic Church or other Christian organizations do not fully embody the spirit that I saw in Jesus, who was nothing but about compassion. And so that those institutions got very far away from the spiritual impulses that gave rise to them.
I think so too. And I think a lot of what can be put upon us in these institutions feeds that discomfort that we feel deep inside, that we're trying to contend with, like you said, in these ways of self-compassion that may not serve us, but it's still us saying to ourselves, well, you don't want to feel like this when you try this route. Well, that doesn't work. And I just feel like that adds to the yuckiness we have to feel about ourselves. If, the guide that we've been told we honor and adore and listen to is saying you're not to be loved unless you do these things, and that adds to your already I'm not loved anyway sort of program. It's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah. I mean, and religious and spiritual trauma is very real, and that was certainly my experience too. I mean, the religious communities that I was deeply involved in were telling me that I was sinful and shameful, and the things that I was feeling are awful, and signs that I'm so far away from God, and even the way God was talked about was just so painful. God has His reasons for letting these things happen. Like, are you kidding me? I mean,
yeah, why?
So what is wrong with me that God would let all this happen to me? And so, yeah,
and what kind of God does let that happen?
What kind of God lets that happen? Exactly. So I think there's a lot of false gods being taught in religious communities, I think.
That's an awful lot for you to come through what you came through and still really have this faith.
My faith is not in the institution, right? My faith is in, a deep sense, a deep experience that has been sustained through my last, decades, that there really is some spiritual reality. It's, for me, it's an energy of love that just keeps everything connected and sustains all things. And I don't anthropomorphize it myself. That doesn't make sense for me, but that there is some reality there. And when we brush close to that, whether in lovely conversation or at a sunset or in moments of presence, when we're connected to that, it just feels loving. It feels benevolent. It feels like I am held right here. I am cradled. I am seen. I am heard. And that is profoundly restorative. It is deeply, deeply restorative. And so my faith is in that, and wanting to understand how faith communities can be about cultivating connection with that, and how that then translates into our practices of self-restoration and compassion for others that embodies that spiritual impulse, and critiquing the religious structures and teachings that are just so violating of what that's about. So yeah, my faith is in that, deep knowing about that, but that's not taught a lot in the spiritual communities that we find ourselves in.
But you came from a place where you had to question your value because someone told you God thought you deserved this, and you had to question what kind of God would do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you learned a lot there.
I tell you, come a long way.
Yeah.
I was convinced that I was just soiled goods and that God was disgusted with me. Absolutely convinced. And I still had this vision of this God that's all powerful and makes things happen and could have stopped this abuse but didn't, and for God's mysterious reasons. And I still had that God constructed that only exacerbated the pain and the trauma, and all that all had to die. That all had to be dismantled and deconstructed, and out of that ashes some other palpable spiritual reality emerged that genuinely was transformative and restorative.
So many people going through that.
Yeah.
What are some helpful things that we could share today to help people that are struggling practice techniques around compassion or love? I know the word technique and love don't really go together, but you what you went through, your path was decades long, and mine was decades long. And if there is a way to help people kind of see themselves in a more whole way, to see themselves as something to love, what are some things that people can do?
Yeah, well, what you just named feels really important right there, is just to see ourselves in a different way, right? I mean, wherever we are, whatever we're struggling with, whatever shames or challenges that we're carrying that we judge, if we could turn and see ourselves with the same care we would for a beloved friend who is coming to us with those very things. We'd say, hey, you know what? There's a reason why you're feeling all of this right now, and tell me more. Let me understand what's going on. And you know what? It's a miracle that you're even surviving it all, given everything that you've been through. And so, being able to not be at war with ourselves, but rather this radical acceptance, and where I am is a beautiful thing in and of itself, and there's reasons for all of it, and it can be held with care and curiosity and understanding. I mean, that shift of our own, that's a gigantic, for me, that's a gigantic shift.
I think so. Thank you for that. And this love, this light of love that we each have in us, we are
Absolutely.
not that bad thing. I know we said that before, but I really believe that.
Original goodness, not original sin.
Yeah,
we were
there's a
beautiful.
big difference.
That's a light and day, right? Exactly. And also finding people that see you that way is huge, right? Your husband, I mean, what a gift that was.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, whether it's, a companion or a friend or a therapist or a spiritual director, but finding people who can see us in ways that we're having a hard time seeing ourselves. Those are lifelines. Those are precious, sacred gifts.
They
as
are.
Well.
And then somewhere finding the strength to bring yourself forward, or the strength to look at what you thought was a truth and think, what if I didn't look at it that way? What would happen if I thought about this in another way?
Yeah.
What if I didn't feel dirty? What would I feel?
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, and that shift in perception feels really big and important. And also, I mean, kind of recognizing the deep suffering within us, where that comes from. You know, like for me, I mean, they're just like the children still imprisoned in these traumatic memories. What they needed from me was compassion. They needed, and even kind of in meditative, in deep ways, you know, to actually kind of be with them and say, you know what, those are lies that you absorb about, you know, what's wrong with you because of this, and to actually kind of extend to them the kind of care and compassion that they did not have back then. That rewires our brain. It rewires the deep narratives that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And that's profoundly healing work as well. And that's a deep invitation that we can all do more cultivating around. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the good ways to get to some of that information is, you know, sort of via our dreams. Really, our dreams hold the keys to our unconscious and all the things that are going on in there, everything we carry, all the things that we're traumatized by. And if we can begin to read, understand, feel what we're being gifted every night or every time we go to sleep, I think we can uncover a lot of what's going on deep inside. And I mean, that's really how I started my investigation. I was finally able to give up some of this falsity, this falsehood, by looking at what I was being told that contradicted that in my dreams. And it took a long time. I said, that's just baloney. That's what that is. But eventually I started to say, what if that's not baloney? What if I look at that as something to contend with? It's coming up every night. What if I think about it and talk about it and feel it? And that started to make the shift and give me some bravery around creating a different space for myself, a loving space for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Cynthia. I mean, I think that our soul is aching for healing and restoration and is always trying to find ways to get our attention and let us know what it needs to be held and what it needs to be healed. And dreams is unvarnished, right? I mean, there's no censoring agent. So that's one of the places where our soul is reaching out, making a bid for, hey, you know, listen, you know, notice this. This is what I need. And so I had a similar experience with the nightmares and dreams I was having through my recovery. And also, you know, the times when you're reading accounts of sexual abuse and you find yourself getting moved and crying, that's our soul also kind of trying to get our attention, saying, hey, there's something inside here that's resonating here. So if we just paid attention to our own soul in the way that it's trying to reach out for healing through our dreams, through the reactions that we have, through the emotions that we feel in different settings, you're like, okay, what is my soul reaching out for and aching for in the midst of this? That opens up a path of healing and restoration.
So many opportunities.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, even some of our physical ailments.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can look at that and say, well, why?
Absolutely.
Why is this happening?
Yeah, yeah. Or just the bodily sensations that we experience. Why am I getting so tightened up when I'm going to this meeting? You know, what is my body telling me about danger? There's something about this that feels threatening. Okay, so where does that come from? And what about that situation harkens to something that's deeper inside of me?
Yeah, because you look at it at face value.
Exactly. So our body's trying to get our attention, our soul, through our dreams. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Really creating hopefulness around change, one individual at a time. And this idea of compassion is just a beautiful thing and like chokes me up. So thank you so much for sharing your life story in a small way with us today and in a big way in your book. And is there also a website one can go to find out more about your center? Oh, you did tell us that name again.
Yeah, the Center for Engaged Compassion.com.
.com.
Yeah.
And your book and your other books.
Yeah.
Are,
they're, you can find them there. I want to express my gratitude also for the conversation, Cynthia, but also for you and the work that you're doing. I mean, it's just so clear that you have such a tender spirit, and your own compassionate essence is just palpable, and that's profoundly moving and profoundly restorative, and I can feel that's the pulse underneath these podcasts and these conversations. And
thank you. I'm so touched.
It's genuine, and it makes a difference. It really that's a healing presence in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here with us today. Please follow and share this podcast. It's super important. Pass this episode along to someone who might need it. This is And Now Love. Listen to your dreams and live from your heart.